So right now there's this huge black market for infertility medications, and we're focused on eradicating that altogether. The black market doesn't have to exist. Patients tend to have like $2,000 in extra medications that they never use during their IVF cycle.
The startup investment landscape is changing, and world-class companies are being built outside of Silicon Valley. We find them, talk with them, and discuss the upside of investing in them.
Welcome to Upside.
Hello, and welcome to the Upside Podcast, the first podcast finding upside outside of Silicon Valley. I'm Eric Hornung, and I'm accompanied by my co-host, Mr. One and Done himself, Jay Klaus. Jay, how's it going, man?
I'm feeling great. I'm feeling invincible, actually. We may have already talked about this, but as you and I both just said, we don't really remember. Being 2 weeks post-vaccine feels like a whole new life. I feel like a whole new man.
Is that maybe a side effect of the vaccine? You just don't remember things anymore? We're getting old.
It could be. Also, side effect of the vaccine, apparently potential blood clots, but seems a little overblown to me. I did get a lot of text messages of people who were concerned about my Johnson & Johnson vaccine and the blood clots.
Do you feel your blood is flowing appropriately still?
Yeah, I feel like my blood is actually flowing more strongly. It feels like the river is even less obstructed.
What a way to describe your veins.
Yeah, I just have immunity coursing through my veins, and I feel great. You have the first shot?
I have both. I was a Pfizer guy. Yeah.
Are you 2 weeks post?
I am a month post. I'm more than a month post.
Wow. Having that hookup at the hospital really worked out for you.
All you got to do is get your name on a list, and it worked out. But hey, now anybody can get the shot if they want it. So get out there, get your shot. There's my little PSA on the podcast.
You get your vaccination, you go back into the world, and you live this one life you have to live the best way that you can.
And if you want to learn more about living that one life you have to live the best way you can go to upside.fm/ethos and check out our friends Ethos Wealth Management. Jay, speaking of shots and living the best life you have to live, wow, do we have a portmanteau here.
What a slam dunk segue. I don't know what portmanteau means. Does it mean a slam dunk segue?
It's when you mash two words together.
Oh, well, that's a great word. Today, we are speaking with Abby Mercado, the co-founder and CEO of Best Shot. Best Shot is a patient's companion in fertility treatments, providing medication management and education, streamlining the pharmaceutical ordering experience, and enabling safe, supportive micro-communities led by experts. Eric, this is a world that you and I probably know less than just about anybody else about.
We are the perfect interviewers for this show. I'm going to ask some dumb questions. I can already feel it.
I can't wait. Abby is a former venture capital investor and current mom of IVS twins. Best Shot was founded in January 2019 and based in Denver, Colorado.
You know, I think I used portmanteau wrong earlier. I think that's a compound noun, Best Shot. It's two separate nouns next to each other. A portmanteau would be like if I really mash those words together. So it'd be like best shit.
Portmanteau has like some weight to it. It feels like something related to a fight. I don't know, like they got into a real portmanteau and they threw fisticuffs.
It's also annoying because a portmanteau, the word portmanteau should be a portmanteau, right? But it's not, as far as I know.
Also cool about Best Shot is they went through 2020 Techstars Boulder at the very beginning of their company. So I'm excited to learn more about this world of fertility. Eric, as two engaged men, this is probably something we should be thinking about in the near future. See if we learn something.
I'm guessing we will. If you want to chat with us about what we learned, the stupid questions we ask, or anything else, you can hit us up on Twitter at UpsideFM. Or if you have something a little longer, reach out to us at hello@upside.fm. And we will get to that interview right after this. I hate that we've demonized scheduling links, Jay.
Scheduling links are actually one of my favorite things. I love the ease of someone saying, here's when you can book a time with me. And then I can choose when it's best for me too.
Whenever I get an outreach and someone says, what time looks good for you? I ask them, hey, do you have a scheduling tool? And you know what scheduling tool I wish they had?
Which one is that?
It's a new scheduling tool called SavvyCal. SavvyCal makes it easy for both parties to find the best time to meet.
SavvyCal makes the scheduling process even more savvy than any other scheduling tool that I've seen, and I mean that. It makes it so easy to personalize your link. You can say, hey, this is a meeting time for Jay and Eric, and it just looks so professional, so sophisticated.
So much so that we're going to be using it for Upside going forward, and maybe even rolling it out to the Upside network.
You can use SavvyCal as well. You can sign up for a free account at savvycal.com/upside. That's savvycal.com/upside. And when you're ready to upgrade to a paid plan, you can use the promo code UPSIDE for a free month.
I am a Texas girl born and raised, Dallas, Texas. I went off to college at Vanderbilt University. I studied something called human and organizational development and history because I enjoyed learning about what I wanted to learn about. I went off to Wall Street right after college. My parents, who both worked in finance, were like, yeah, it'd be a good skill set to learn. It was also 2008, 2009. So any job was a good job. And so I worked for Merrill Lynch in the Industrials Investment Banking Group, and I absolutely hated it. It was horrible, like the worst. So I promptly decided that was not what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, which I think is pretty common among investment banking analysts. I was working 100 hours a week, but it was fun living in New York. So I decided that I would do something totally different than what I was doing. So I didn't want to work in private equity, didn't want to work for a hedge fund, but I wanted to work in something called corporate development. And so, I snagged a recruiter and she was like, hey, this is kind of a wild idea, but would you be interested in moving to Denver and working for a startup? And I was like, I've never been to Denver and I've never worked for a startup, but I am an Aries and I am a natural born entrepreneur. And I did sell lemonade door to door if nobody was driving by my house as a child. So maybe this makes some sense. So I moved out to Denver sight unseen to work for an energy company. So I was an early employee at a company called Triangle Petroleum. The shale oil and gas boom was kind of taking hold at this point. And, I was really interested in all things macro. I was also interested in energy poverty. And I was like, this just sounds like a ton of fun. So it was a couple of guys who had met at business school. They went to Wharton together and they were really just, looking for kind of a young, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed chief of staff. So that was me and had a blast. It was so fun. That was kind of my first taste of startup life. And it was very much, I decided I wanted to work in the startup world for the rest of my life. The CEO one day came to my desk and said, hey, we're going to start a midstream company. And I was like, what? I thought I came here to work for an E&P company. This is weird. And he was like, well, we're going to vertically integrate. So I said, okay. He was like, okay, figure out how to do it. So I did. He was the kind of boss who, John Samuels is his name. He's still very much a part of my life. And he's the kind of boss who just says, all right, here's your challenge. Let me know if you need additional resources and here's your due date. So long story short, I founded a company called Caliber Midstream. We obtained hundreds of millions of dollars in funding for that company. And we killed it in the Bakken Shale, which was really fun. Our differentiator was that we gathered and processed not only crude oil and natural gas, but also produced water. So it was a unique value proposition at the time. So I was there for a little while. A finance role became very unfun because we had a lot of money. So I was like, this business development thing looks really fun. So I joined the sales team. And it turns out I was pretty good at it and I loved it. And so I really got my sales training at Caliber Midstream. I sold pipe. Which was, it was fun. So the energy industry crashed in 2016. And I said, this isn't so fun anymore at all. I'm going to go out looking. And I'm really interested in how to fix the oil and gas industry. I didn't love the industry. I found it strategically interesting, but I thought that there were a ton of problems. And, I wouldn't have said proudly I worked for the oil and gas industry just because there were, and even on this podcast, I'm like, oh, should I tell them I worked in oil and gas? Like I live a little bit too close to Boulder to tell anyone that I used to work in oil and gas. But I kind of had this thought in my mind, like, how do we fix this? Like, how do I become part of, fixing this problem? And so I quite literally Googled oil and gas venture capital. And I found this firm called Altera Group. And so I became really interested in how do we take technology and affect change in the oil and gas industry? This is a massive amount of, how the world gets their energy. Like, how can we make it better? Like, maybe we can eradicate emissions altogether. Who knows? The opportunities are endless. And so I joined this firm, Altera Group, as a pre-partner, and it was a ton of fun. I found myself investing in B2B SaaS, which was my first taste of software. It was awesome. I learned so much about software. I was really able to get in the heads of these founders, and it was a blast, understanding how to build and how to grow a software business. And we invested in 3 companies that I was pretty involved in from a software perspective: ThoughtTrace, Seek, and a company called ResFrac. About a year into my VC experience, I found myself like jealous of the founders. And so, I kind of took a step back and was like, this is a little problematic. Like, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. And so, I kind of had that sight in my, I knew that there was going to be an exit path in which I would go back to being an entrepreneur. And so, I was kind of always ears to the ground, trying to find, is this going to be my business? Is this going to be like a young team that I would go off and join? I knew that I wanted to exit VC at some point and become an entrepreneur again myself. And then in the meantime, my husband, Sean, and I were trying to conceive, and it was hard and it wasn't working. And I experienced some challenges there. So yeah, so that's my history kind of before Best Shot.
You mentioned that you're kind of a buff for all things macro.
Yeah.
How do you think about, you've been down oil and gas, and then you found B2B SaaS, you're doing venture capital. What an awesome just backstory in general. I feel like we could spend an hour and a half just digging through that alone. But how do you think about analyzing like macro trends? How does something show up on your radar, and how does it become interesting to you?
I think that this is all back in college when we became interested in energy. I remember writing a paper, about why third world countries are third world countries. The answer that I came to was that they all had energy poverty. They all didn't have like easy access to energy. And so that's how I became very interested in that. And then, in terms of, a macro trend that is fascinating to me right now in this business is when I first became really interested in fertility, which is of course what I do now. Like, we're all waiting to have kids. Like, our parents had kids when they were in their 20s. We're all having kids when we're in our 30s. And biologically speaking, that's really not exactly supposed to happen. That's not how our bodies are made. So I think in terms of uncovering this macro trend, it was, just something that I was going through myself. And I just got really, really curious about it and started kind of running the numbers. And yeah, I don't know, the Wall Street Journal, Eric, maybe? That's how
the investment banker in you is coming out again.
Did you offhand say that you co-founded a company that raised hundreds of millions of dollars in funding?
Yeah.
Tell me about that. That was your first time doing so. I know this is like way more than we can get into in probably the next couple of minutes, but hit the highlights of what was that experience like? Did you feel equipped to do that?
No. But like, are we ever equipped to do anything that we set out to do? No, I don't think so. We all kind of play it by ear. So this isn't, I think we come at this kind of with the lens of VC, like raising hundreds of millions of dollars of VC was really like, whoa, this is like very much investing in assets versus technology. So yes, it was a lot of money. We raised money. So, essentially Triangle Petroleum was a publicly traded company, and that company, because the company had like proven its value, proven its worth, and had assets to dedicate to the midstream system, the capital raising process was, I think it was impressive because we were basically raising money off of an idea, but the assets were there, which was helpful. We raised money from First Reserve, large private equity firm. It was really interesting because we had kind of, John had the relationship in place with First Reserve, and they were very much a part of, kind of the idea and, the formulation of, what this would look like, what a full service midstream company was going to look like. And yeah, I mean, it was definitely challenging, but because it was asset focused versus, technology, like, whoa, what is this? Like this is literally, pipeline. Like it had a very like distinct cost. So, and, like I said, the oil and gas assets were already there, which Triangle Petroleum contributed to. And then because of course these are assets, debt was easy to raise because, there was also cash flow. So yes, it was challenging. No, I did not know what I was doing, but it was really cool to have that opportunity when I was like 25.
Okay. One quick follow up then. Being that young and having this itch that you knew, like you were a natural born entrepreneur, you said, when you raised that kind of money to do something, how committed to the long term did you feel to that thing in that moment? Because to me, that feels like a huge commitment to take on.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, spot on. Caliber Midstream was my baby. I was so like the day I left Caliber that was a really tough day. And the company's still there. I named the company. Like I remember this really distinctly. I was in New York, I was visiting some friends, and I was going through the Holland Tunnel. And I had just gotten off the phone with John, and he was like, okay, you've got to name this company. And so I hung up with John, and I was like, okay. He was like, you have to name this company in like the next few hours. I was like, whoa, this is really stressful. But that was kind of the culture that we were, operating in. And so I called my dad, who I'm very close with. He was, for fear of sounding like so oil and gas and like so Texas, like I guess that's who I am, but he's a big sportsman. So he was cleaning his guns. It's like very safe. Like he likes to shoot ducks, like, they're overpopulated, like whatever. And so he was like, what about Caliber Midstream? My dad said that. And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. Okay. I called John back. I was like, Caliber Midstream. He was like, done. File the LLC agreement. And I did. So I mean, this was my baby. Like I felt very like dedicated to this business for the 4 years that I was there.
Let's pivot from that baby to babies generally. The idea of fertility. You mentioned earlier that we're getting married later, we're having kids later, and biology is not supposed to work like that. Why not? Technically, why isn't fertility a thing?
Yeah, biologically, like when a woman has her period, which happens during puberty, like that's when we're supposed to be having kids. So, if a young girl has her period between the ages of, 12 and 15 or so, give or take. So like biologically, that's just how our bodies are made. And there are all sorts of, drivers as to why, fertility is now a thing versus when, prior to when IVF was a thing, which was, IVF became a thing in, I think, 1978 was when the first IVF baby was born. So, essentially a woman is born with millions of eggs, and, that is rapidly declining as she's getting older. And like the crazy thing is that hold on, let me see if I can get this right. I was at one point in my grandmother's stomach.
What? Yes.
I know what is right. So my mom, you're born with all of the eggs that you're ever going to have, and that's just going to decrease and decrease. So my mom was a baby in her mom's stomach, and I was an egg in there. Like, that is wild. You guys are looking at me like I'm a nutcase. But
that is crazy. Well, it's just crazy that I never
know.
knew this. Like, I've heard the term egg, obviously,
yes.
But I kind of thought that they were generated constantly and then lost. Not that you started with like this overall tally that decreases over time. So basically at age 35, your egg count drops off a cliff. So think about a lot of people that at age 35. Some people are not married. Maybe they're never going to get married. Like, it doesn't matter. But it's definitely
become a thing to like women are in the workforce, right? Like women make up 50% of the population. Like that didn't used to be a thing. We have to remind ourselves of that. We're waiting longer to have babies and to have families. So, I don't know if I answered your question, Eric, but it's definitely a societal trend. And like IVF has to be more accessible because it is so challenging for so many people because of these societal shifts.
Can you define IVF for people who are not familiar with the acronym?
Yeah, for sure. IVF means in vitro fertilization.
And that is?
So essentially, that is extracting an egg or a bunch of eggs from a woman's body and marrying those eggs with sperm that are extracted from the man's body, essentially putting them in a petri dish for, simplicity's sake. I'll put it that way. Letting them meet, letting them combine, and essentially eggs are either fertilized or not with the sperm. And then they have to survive. They have to make it to something called blastocyst phase. And then they're often frozen and then they're genetically tested. So 1 in 4 pregnancies end in a miscarriage. And the number one cause of a miscarriage is that an embryo is not genetically normal. So we do genetic testing on embryos to make sure everything's all good, and also to prevent miscarriage. This is, I love talking about this because it's something like infertility. IVF is not covered by insurance by and large, but genetic testing is almost never covered. So if you think about, kind of the economics of IVF, like it makes absolutely zero sense. So anyway, genetically tested, and the embryos that are genetically normal, they are transferred back into a woman's body, one of the embryos or 2 in my case, which is becoming less and less common and quote unquote allowed. And I can go into that if you'd like for me to. But and then, presumably that embryo grows into a baby inside the woman's stomach. So this scientific process helps people that are not otherwise able to get pregnant the old-fashioned way.
Let me one more real quick question on this front. You mentioned that at age 35, your number of eggs drops off a cliff. If we think about individuals, how much variance is there with that age? Are some people hitting that cliff at age 30 and 35 is kind of the average?
Yeah, I'm no physician, but my understanding is it's pretty much the average. Like there's not too much variance kind of across, different people's bodies.
So with this kind of background, take us into Best Shot. What is it and how did it come about?
Where I left you was that I really wanted to start my own company or join a young team. And, kind of simultaneously, my husband, Sean, and I were going through something really challenging. So we were, I'm pretty type A. So Sean and I met in college and we re-met out in Denver. He was my first friend. And then we decided that we were in love and yada, 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 which is fun. Hi, Sean. So I told him, all right, we're going to get married. And then, 2 years after we get married, we're going to have a baby. And then 2 years after that, we're going to have another baby. And, we're going to have a mortgage and a Suburban and, all of these things. And like, that's just what life is going to be like. And he was all for it. So got married 2 years later, started trying to conceive, big deal, pulled the goalie, like all that good stuff. And 3 years into trying, I was freaking out and nothing was happening. So I get checked. I'm totally fine. Sean gets checked. He's not. So, fertility is stigmatized no matter what. Male factor infertility is even more stigmatized because you're like, wait, this is a women's issue. And in our case, it very much was not. Sean's sperm are very public. They're public figures here at Best Shot. And they don't move forward. They chase each other around in a circle. They're very social. So is he. So, essentially we were told that we had less than a 1% chance of getting pregnant if we did not do in vitro fertilization, IVF. So we did an IUI, which is a precursor to IVF, just to be safe. And that didn't work, failed miserably. And then the next month we decided to do IVF. So we actually living in Denver, Denver is the home to one of the world's best fertility clinics. It's called CCRM, Colorado Center for Reproductive Medicine, founded by Dr. Bill Schoolcraft years and years and years ago, huge pioneer. So we were going to this clinic. We saw Dr. Sarah Barton. So it was our IVF month and things were hard. Things were really hard. So we were younger than the average population going through this. We were 32. And I didn't really have any friends who had gone through this. My friends were, having babies and having babies really easily. I was going to like a baby shower a weekend. It was emotional. It was hard. It was tough. And so it was also incredibly expensive. So $30,000, my venture capital firm that I was working for didn't provide fertility coverage. Sean works in actually the women's health space, and his company didn't have infertility coverage either. And so we were left to spend $30,000 out of pocket, which was hard to come up with. And so we ended up taking out a second mortgage. We literally tacked onto our HELOC. And yeah, it was rough. That was the best interest rate we could find at that point in time. It was 2018. So, but we prevailed. We decided we were going to do this. Like, we were going to do it with a good attitude. Like, we're going to have a baby. So it was a priming month. So an IVF cycle, or our particular IVF cycle, was essentially going to be split into 3 different months. So the first month is a priming month. So, you're essentially priming your body with all of the medications that you need to generate as many eggs as humanly possible, such that they can be ovulated, such that they can be retrieved. And then, the second month is the actual stem cycle, when you're doing just that. And then the third month is the transfer month, when you take the frozen embryos that have come out genetically normal and then, transfer them back into the woman's body. So month 1 of 3, priming month, was taking all these medications. And so a couple of facts: generally during a stem cycle, it's going to take about 50 self-prepared and administered shots to generate all of those eggs, follicles with eggs inside of them that will be retrieved. So a lot going on. And the whole process is a mess. And, these are the problems that we're solving. But, you're ordering from a mail order pharmacy. You've never heard of these pharmacies before. There's no way to, kind of pick out the varying value propositions of these specialty pharmacies. It's not at your local Walgreens or CVS or Duane Reade or, wherever you live. And then you have a big box of medications, and they're delivered, and you're like, what is all this crap? Like, I work in venture capital, and like all of a sudden you're giving me like a bag of syringes and like gauze pads and like diluent and all this stuff. It's all these chemicals that you're putting in your body. And, as a proud millennial female, I want to know what's in there. So long story short, I was taking a drug called Satratide during the month of May. Sean and I were camping with some friends. It was Memorial Day weekend, and we live in Colorado. #Colorado. That's what we do. We camp for Memorial Day weekend. And, we were taking the Satratide, and, it had to be temperature controlled. So we had it in this little cooler. And, I remember being very dutiful about, going and taking the Satratide and, making sure it was correct. And, I'd had this regimen that, my doctor had given me, my nurse had given me, and I had taken a picture of it. And, it was just flat out, it was confusing. Like, stuff was scratched out everywhere. It was, and, another fact about IVF, you have to go to the doctor every day, every other day, to get blood work done and to get an ultrasound done. And every time you do, your regimen changes and you get a new piece of paper. So as a technologist, this was already like driving me nuts out. Yeah. So anyway, I thought I was following my regimen. Turns out I was not following my regimen. So I accidentally took 3x the amount of Satratide than I was supposed to. Smart person, right? Like, my husband's smart also. I'm very incentivized to get pregnant, like, not only because I really wanted to have a baby, but also because I'm paying $30,000 out of pocket. So like, really wanted to do this right, but I got it wrong. So we go back to Denver, and, about a week later, I'm a week late. My period's always been very regular. It was, it's weird. And so, I went and got a pregnancy test, which was like the last thing I wanted to do, because like when you're going through fertility, you're like, no way am I pregnant. I was pregnant naturally after being told by a doctor that I had less than a 1% chance of getting pregnant. You hear these stories sometimes, like when you least expect it, even though it's been determined that you have infertility, you get pregnant. And so called my fertility clinic. I told them I was pregnant, and they said, you're probably going to miscarry because you were taking Satratide. And I was like, well, yeah. And so I think I actually took more Satratide than I was supposed to, like 3x, because your sheet was so confusing. And they're like, yeah, you're definitely going to miscarry. So sure enough, I miscarried. It's incredibly tragic, horrible, horrible thing to happen. Worse than it's ever happened to me. Ultimately, we were successful in IVF. I have 2-year-old twins, Max and Annie. But that miscarriage is why I started this business. The medication process just has to be easier for patients. And, there's a lot of really cool startups in the fertility space right now. And there's a ton of female founders who have experienced the problem firsthand, and they all seem to attach to like one thing. And I am one of those women. I'm one of those founders. My thing was the meds. Like, let's make the meds easy. Like, why? I felt like I was being pushed off a literal Colorado 14er when I was asked to take all of these medications. There's just not enough education. There's not enough answers for patients. This is an incredibly stressful process. And, the medical industry is quite literally failing patients when it comes to infertility. So that is my founder story.
How much of what Best Shot is doing is just pure education then? Like,
Yeah.
what is the product here?
Yeah. So the product as it stands right now enables an easier way for patients to choose specialty pharmacies. So like I said, they're not all equal. They're difficult to kind of, understand, like, what is the value proposition? How do you differentiate that value proposition? And so, patients are able to more easily select a specialty pharmacy that's a fit for them. Secondly, education, huge part of what we're doing. So we filmed all of our own MedTeach content, and it's really speaking to the millennial population who's going through this. They're more, the status quo is like 8-minute long videos that you have to search for on YouTube, and you don't know if they're right. And it's always like a 20-year-old like Russian size 00 supermodel, and you're like, what? Like, I'm a size 6 and I'm like 32 and like, oh, I'm sad. Like, this doesn't resonate. So anyway, we filmed videos that do resonate with patients, more like TikTok videos. And we've spent a lot of time and money on the user experience, the user interface. And then lastly, it's really difficult to adhere to a regimen. So we're making this a lot easier, quite simply with push notifications. What we're working on right now is we're a direct to consumer company. And so we're focused on wrapping the patient around with a digital hug, community, content, resources, things like that that'll help them through this process. And just as though their employers have left them behind, we're saying to them, we're not going to leave you behind. We join our community, have a membership with Best Shot, and we'll help you through this pharmaceutical process and so much more. So we'll actually, another thing that we're really focused on, so the economic driver that we're working on as a business is to reduce waste. So right now there's this huge black market for infertility medications, and we're focused on eradicating that altogether. The black market doesn't have to exist. Patients tend to have like $2,000 in extra medications that they never use during their IVF cycle. This can be fixed with technology, and it'll be fixed with Best Shot's technology. So instead of trying to illegally sell each other medications and exchange those medications at Target or wherever these women decide to meet up, we're getting rid of that waste altogether. So wrapping our patients with this community and providing them with tools and resources to make the fertility process so much easier, and also to save them money on medications.
Where does that waste come from? So I'm paying all this money to go into this process, and do I have to buy in bulk, and then somewhere through the process the magic happens and I just don't need the rest, or what?
Yeah. So essentially, because there's not the communication link is broken. So what happens? So everything is very cute. Like, you're going through this all very fast. Everything has to be carefully timed. So a doctor typically orders 10 days of medications for you. And you don't really question that because you're like, okay, whatever the doctor says goes. But we're sitting here questioning that. And, with our team of medical advisors, we know that that's not totally necessary. And the pharmacies, of course, love it because they're like, oh, okay, I got a script and I'm just going to fill it and make money. Whereas they could have filled 50 to 75% of that script, not 100% of that script, and saved the patient thousands So we're working on just-in-time medication delivery. And we think that this extends, we think there's a huge waste problem just across the pharmaceutical industry. So, what we're doing is not limited to fertility. It's, it's MS, HIV, AIDS, transplants, rheumatology, et cetera. That's kind of our moonshot down the road. But, we're starting with fertility and starting with cash pay patients. That is our wedge to solve these problems for patients.
I want to thank you just for sharing so much openly and publicly so far. I know we dove right into some questions there, but there's just so much that came out in that founder story. How do you think about, you mentioned we're going to focus on the medical, you mentioned there's a bunch of startups focusing elsewhere, but then there's this waste problem and that pops up, and then there's the finance problem of a $30,000 mortgage that pops up, and then there's this other problem that pops up. It seems like there's just so much to tackle here. How do you kind of stay focused every day now that you're in execution mode?
Yeah, it was hard at first. So we went through Techstars. We were lucky to launch our business through Techstars, which is a great opportunity to be able to just move really quickly. So that was awesome. And it became like we had so many ideas as to how to, and I was always about the medications. Like I knew that this was always going to be, the idea and the problem that I wanted to solve as a founder. Just everything about the medications. And you know what? We did test a lot of things. Like we're definitely not, this journey has not been perfect. I think we've pivoted twice. So it's, that's an important thing to, understand. It's like any founder who admits that is great. Like you will pivot. Every company will pivot to some extent. Not every idea is perfect out of the gate. So, I think the ability to stay focused now is because there was a time that what we were doing didn't work and we had to make it work. We had to pivot such that it was working. So it's hard, but it can be done. And you've got to eye on the revenue ball. If it's not going to generate revenue for your business is going to die. So no revenue, don't focus on it.
I wanted to ask one more quick clarifying question, make sure I heard you right. You mentioned, you get these boxes in the mail and you have syringes and this medication and you have like this piece of paper. It sounds to me like the instruction manual itself was really, really poor and difficult to understand. How much access did you have to your physician to ask clarifying questions? Did that feel like something that was easy to accomplish if this set of instructions itself was difficult to understand?
Yeah, that's a great question. The answer is no. I love my physician. She's our medical advisor now. Hi, Dr. Barton. Or Sarah. I call her Sarah now. Dr. Barton seemed very formal. Did not have access to Sarah. She is busy treating 750 patients annually at the best fertility clinic in the world. However, I did have pretty regular access to the nursing team. So some facts about nurses. And, kind of think about it with the lens that we are providing a connective tissue between all three key stakeholders. So the patient, the clinic, and the pharmacy. So yes, we're focused on doing things that help the patient. We're focused on monetizing from pharmacy, but we're also focused on helping the people who are actually providing the patient care, the clinic. So really building this beautiful and strengthening this beautiful circle of life of three people who really need to work together to get somebody pregnant that otherwise exists they exist on these separate islands and they shouldn't be separate islands. So the nurse right now, 70% of that nurse's time is spent answering questions related to medications. So that's a lot of time. It's a lot of wasted time. Technology can do this. And nurses should be doing other things like providing top-notch patient care, making sure, more medical questions are answered and fewer medicine questions are answered. And then you take the pharmacist. So, this is again, this kind of circle of life idea. I watched The Lion King with my kids over the weekend, so sorry about the reference. So you take the pharmacist and you're like, okay, since 2004, this person has been required to get a doctorate in medications. Interesting. Often they have clinical residencies. A pharmacist who is dispensing fertility medications are specialty. They have very specific training in what these medications are, what their interactions are, how to prepare and administer them, et cetera, et cetera. So you're like, okay, the nurse is spending 70% of their time doing this. So what's the pharmacist doing? That makes no sense. So for me, Yeah, I had access to my nurse, but she was running around like a chicken with her head cut off, like love her to death. Hi, Gracie. But like, it was broken, like absolutely broken. So truly, like, I wish I had had better access to, some other advocate. And it's our belief that that advocate can be the pharmacist.
How many women are going through this, whether it's IVF or some other, I'm assuming that there's more than just IVF in terms of people who are signing up for Best Shot, but I could be wrong there. And how big is that as a percentage of women, your target audience? I'm just trying to understand, like, is this 25% of the time? Is this 1% of the time?
Yeah. No, that's a good question. So the market's big. So I would say IVF and egg freezing. So IVF and, IUI as well. Lots of people do IUI. It's not like the medication problems, which we're answering, are not huge issues to tackle like they are in IVF, but they're still confusing. You're still injecting yourself with a shot. So 400,000 IVF cycles in 2021 and 20,000 egg freezing cycles. However, 1 in 8 people have infertility. 1 in 6 Canadians have infertility, and 1 in 10 Danish babies is born an IVF baby. So the reason we're not seeing more people go through IVF is because it's not covered. It's not accessible. So $30,000 for someone to pay to have a baby is just not something that's realistic for most Americans. The average salary, so the average person going through IVF will do 2.5 cycles. So if you add those numbers together, $75,000, that's higher than the average salary in the US by far. So again, it's just not accessible. When it is, I think we'll uncover the true numbers associated with infertility. But until then, I think we have to believe that, 1 in 8 people have infertility, and a lot of those people just don't have access to this kind of care. And it's fundamental, I believe.
Are there any trends around how that 1 in 8 has been changing over time? Like, has that been stable throughout human history, or is it?
No, I don't think so. There aren't any statistics that I'm aware of. I think where we started, the science is very new, and it's also stigmatized. So we haven't really we didn't start talking about it until a few years ago, and IVF has been, a thing since 1978. I have a friend, I was born in 1986, and I have a friend who's an IVF baby, but that's like very, very rare. So this is a very new science, and, it's a really exciting science. It really is. I think, kind of the latest, greatest, and this was a few years ago, is like vitrification. So flash freezing eggs and embryos. We didn't used to be able to do that as well. And so that preserves the embryos, preserves the eggs. There was a news story a couple months ago that was talking about the oldest embryo to ever be transferred. The embryo was like 20 years old or something like that. Like, that is wild. That's amazing science. Like, holy moly. So statistics have not been, there's a data problem in this industry for sure. That's how I'll summarize it. Data problem, but there's a lot of people kind of working on, how to make this industry better with data.
It sounded to me like, when you're talking about this circle of life of patient, clinic, and pharmacy, it sounds like the customer is the pharmacy, the user is the patient. Is that correct?
Yes.
How does that model work?
The customer is the patient. So, essentially we're providing a front end to the curated network of pharmacies that we're working with. And with our front end, they're able to better care for patients in the way that we want them to. So the real customer is the patient, the member of our community who's receiving much better care by virtue of being part of our community. And the best part of being in our community is that it's free. So everyone can be a member. We truly, we want to serve the underserved. That's our mission. That's our goal. We want to be the Walmart. Somebody else can be the Neiman Marcus, but our hearts bleed for, those who are just trying to have a baby. And it's just so dang expensive.
What I was trying to get at is, how does Best Shot earn revenue? It sounded like it was the pharmacies.
Yep. Yeah. So we're essentially taking a cut of pharmacy revenue for cash pay patients in exchange for bringing those pharmacies volume. And so we love kind of the small, medium-sized pharmacies in the fertility space who are great quality pharmacies, but they're having trouble competing, kind of in this day and age with more technology solutions or PBMs. There's one pharmacy in this space that's owned by a PBM, and straight up, that is going to be difficult. That pricing is going to be difficult for anyone to compete with. But if we take this reducing waste approach, as we are taking this reducing waste approach, we think we can beat that pricing every day. We're just taking a more exacting approach to dispensing fertility medication. So success-based cut of revenue is how we make money. And the scripts are $5,000 to $10,000 scripts. So, we're excited to, see those go generic at some point. We think that will take a while to see these medications go generic, but, we're really excited about the business model. It makes sense. Everybody's incentivized to join in what we're doing, all different players. And we're also, we want clinics to recommend us as the number one pharmacy of choice. And so that's why we've done, big trials. We've been around for a year and change, and we've done big trials with Columbia University, Boston IVF, Top 5 Clinic Network, Mainline Fertility liked it so much that they asked to do a SaaS deal with us. We were like, no, we were just trying to learn, but okay, you can have our product and pay for it. That'd be great. And a handful of others that we're working with. So we want to make sure we're doing something for the clinic too. So straight up, we're trying to save nurse time and we're trying to improve outcomes. So saving nurse time, we want to do that by, essentially limiting the number of phone calls that they're making and taking on medications, and also providing insight into the patient's medication inventory. I had my nurse calling me every day being like, Abby, how much Menopur do you have? I'm like, well, I'm in a board meeting in Houston. I can't take this call right now. What? Isn't there an app for this? So now there is, of course, Best Shot. And then secondly, increasing outcomes. So a lot of people don't know this, but fertility clinics have to report their success rates to the CDC. And that's how patients size them up, is their success rates, because they're public, and the CDC, they mean business, right? So my miscarriage was a big black X mark for CCRM because I didn't adhere to my regimen. If I'd only taken that one dose of cetrotide, I might not have miscarried. And that would have been a success rate for CCRM. But that wasn't the case. So we want to reduce risk for clinics and, thereby improving outcomes for their patients.
You've mentioned that this industry there's a stigma around it in general. Have you noticed any friction around members signing up for Best Shot?
So we're partnering with a large community. I can't talk about it freely yet, but we have some really, really, really exciting things coming up. What we have noticed is that patients want to get off Instagram. So, because straight up, you can see who somebody else follows. So historically that's been, the only way to find community when you're going through a fertility challenge. So, our research shows that when a woman is trying to conceive for about 3 months, she's freaking out. She's not talking and nothing's happening. She's freaking out and she's not talking to her friends and family because of the stigma. And she's seeking community. My story was I sought community on Instagram because that's all there was. Now it's gotten a little bit better, but it's a space that we think is absolutely pertinent, not only from a customer acquisition standpoint, but in terms of just doing the right thing and wrapping these patients who are desperate for help in a digital hug and providing them tools like our pharmacy tools. So I was afraid to follow anyone fertility related because I didn't want anyone to know that I was experiencing infertility. So, I would say that the friction exists on an Instagram, but it's 2021. There are way better ways to create community now, and we're in it.
This is a traumatic experience that I can't even fully empathize with as much as I would like to. Now that this is part of your founding story and your company's story, how has this changed your own relationship to this event? To me, just sitting here on this podcast and talking to us about this seems like it could be opening up old wounds. What is that experience like for you as a founder who often has to sell the vision of the company, has to tell the story of the company?
Yeah. I still get pissed off when people announce their pregnancies. No, I'm just kidding. I love babies. But I'm also not that kidding. It's it is really frustrating when it's really easy for somebody to get pregnant, and it just wasn't super easy for my family. I think knowing how much sharing my story might help somebody else is really important to me. So yeah, it's opening old wounds. Yeah, I wish this hadn't been my family's story, but I also am happy that it was. It very much strengthened my marriage. It I look at my children and I see little miracles every single day. Like, I mean, I think everybody has, like, it'd be weird if somebody was like, I have a bad relationship. Like, of course I have a good relationship with my children. They're amazing miracles. But I think, their miracle is something a little bit more scientific to me, which is cool. The cool thing about 2021. And, obviously it's pushed me to start this business and help so many others. So even though the wounds are there, we're such a mission-driven company. Like, every day I'm so excited to, help somebody who's experienced and who is experiencing pain that I've already been through, and I already know how to turn into a positive.
Abby, this has been awesome. Appreciate you coming on. If people want to know more about you or Best Shot, where should they go?
Yeah, bestshotcare.com. Shoot me an email, abby@bestshotcare.com. And hell, send me a text too, 214-912-9066. I'd love to talk to you.
Jay, what's your favorite podcast app named after a fruit?
Gotta be Apple.
Can you think of any other ones?
I tried really hard, but I didn't want to wait for too long. I didn't want too much dead air.
Hey, you know what's worse than dead air? Not getting reviews on Apple Podcasts from your listeners.
Oh my gosh, it is the worst. Every day that I wake up and I don't have a new review on Apple Podcasts, I just look up at the sky and I go, ah!
I like how the first thing you do when you wake up is to look at Apple reviews.
If only I was lying. But I'm not, and I'm looking for new reviews for Upside on Apple Podcasts, Eric. And if you are listening to this right now, you could be that person that helps get the day started right.
All you have to do is go to Apple on your iOS device or web browser, log in, and leave us a review. 5 stars would be nice. 4 stars would be great. Let's do 5 stars.
Let's do 5 stars. Definitely prefer 5 stars. Even if you don't use Apple Podcasts as your preferred listening app on an iPhone, please take a moment to rate us there anyway. It helps us bring on great guests. It helps us climb the charts. Our show will get better if you do this very simple act. So please. All right, Eric, we just spoke with Abby Mercado, the co-founder and CEO of Best Shot. We covered a lot of ground there. We asked a lot of dumb questions. I feel a lot more informed. Where do you want to start?
I want to start with how open Abby was just about her story in general. And I guess I didn't expect that coming in. I don't know why I didn't expect that, but it makes a lot of sense that in order to truly understand this problem, we talk a lot about founders starting on second base. In a weird way, Abby is starting on second base here by understanding this problem from like a first person perspective and being able to share that story with her audience, with her customers.
Yeah, I can't imagine this being like, I think back to the Tixers days and just how often we had to pitch the company, and to have this type of thing be so core to your business and your story, and having to talk about that over and over, I imagine, just has to be really difficult. So I really do appreciate the vulnerability in Abby sharing that. And I appreciate the challenge it must be to do all the things that she's doing and have that her and her husband's story be wrapped so closely into the story of Best Shot. But it does help you better understand her perspective and where she's coming from and why you would want to bet on her as a founder for this company.
When we think about the idea, it actually hits on a big trend that I've talked a lot about with Nick Potts, future guests of the or past guests of the show, potentially future guests of the show, who knows? And I think that for the average person, healthcare is just incredibly confusing. And I think that over the next couple decades, we're going to see a trend of companies that come out just to simplify healthcare for the average person. We're going to create some very large companies just from, hey, here's a really complex process. Here's the easy part. Here's what you need to know. Here's what you need to understand. So I think Best Shot fits that thesis in spades.
So Eric, how would you describe the business model as you understand it for this company? Because to me, it kind of sounds like a media company first and foremost, based on what they're selling and how they're monetizing. But I'm curious what your impression was.
Yeah, I think I got the same. It's kind of community-led product after almost, which is a business model that Jay, you and I are both pretty passionate about, excited about generally, both with what you're doing with SPI and what we're doing here with Upside. kind of starting as a media company and being able to pivot into products, we believe is a lot easier than starting as a product company and trying to bolt on community or media. So yeah, from a business model perspective, I'd agree with you. I'd say it feels a little community focused, which is probably a good thing in the long run.
Yeah. What's interesting to me is most of the time the companies that go through Techstars are like very product first, very software first. And to me, what this sounded like was, hey, we know that there's a huge problem in the way that people communicate with their doctors and with their pharmacies, and it has major consequences. And for the amount of cost involved in what people put into these processes, that just seems like a huge disconnect. But instead of solving that problem with like quote unquote software, like this is being delivered via an app. So there is that. So maybe I'm underthinking this. It feels like there is a consumer play here. But I like that the team didn't just kind of say, how do we solve the problem with technology? It was more like, how do we solve the problem? And technology is part of the solution, but not the entire solution.
I wonder if that's like the difference between a productized service and software as a service. I think that people have been like drawing a distinction between the two lately. And this is not a comment on Best Shot, but more the industry generally, where software as a service is set it, forget it. It's tech, self-serve, go do your thing, or maybe enterprise level. But a productized service is more the service kind of comes first and the tech is an enabler to productize it. I don't know. I need to think a little bit deeper on that.
Yeah. In the world of services, productized services look a lot different than products. Like it's usually more like I have a very common approach to this service arrangement, and you can buy that approach and the outcome, and it's easy for me to repeatably deliver that. I don't know if this really falls into a productized service.
Regardless of it's a software as a service, a productized service, a community first, I think that there's something out there that has some real traction because of two things, Jay. One, I think this is going to be an increasing and rapidly increasing trend, is the issue of infertility, as we have people just who are older and older wanting to have kids. Look, you're almost 30, I'm 30, and we're just getting engaged now. Even 50 years ago, we would be on the very tail end of who's getting married. But I have friends in New York who aren't getting married until 38, 39, 40. And I think that that trend is extending. And one of the repercussions of that is that infertility is going to expand. So we're in an uptrend in infertility. So things like this are going to become more and more common.
I also think culturally, we are more open to share challenges in this world. Historically, I believe, this has been a very taboo subject to talk about. And, this kind of came up in the interview. We don't have a full sense of how many people this is affecting because a lot of people either can't afford to bring this into the system and kind of learn that this is an issue and that they have options, or they don't feel like they want to come forward and talk about their experience in this world. So I agree for both of those reasons. I think this is a growing area of concern. Abby told us that this affects 1 in 8 Americans, that 1 in 4 pregnancies end in miscarriage. These are pretty big numbers. And, this isn't an industry that we want to look at as a growing problem, but it seems that the timing on this does feel like good timing.
Yeah, I think all progress leads to more problems to be solved. And the progress we've made over the last 30 to 50 years, this is one of the kind of problems, the unforeseen consequences of it. So now we get really smart people like Abby, and I'm sure a ton of other awesome entrepreneurs in the fertility space trying to bring down the cost of in vitro services, trying to make it easier and better as a user, as an experience for people who are going through that. And I think that looking at a current market size is probably looking at a cross section when we should be looking at something over time. I'd be looking much more at the lines and the trajectories and the trends when I'm looking at the market size of this space. Very bullish on it from a business growth perspective. The market's, in my opinion, is going to be growing and growing quickly as we have more people like you and I, Jay, who are hitting 30 years old.
Just a couple more numbers that I want to pull out here that were crazy to me. The cost of this being $30,000, there being a black market for infertility medication because of the waste in this space. 70% of a nurse's time is spent answering questions to medications. Like, this just screams that this is not a good experience. And to have somebody like Abby and her husband Sean, who are extremely intelligent people who have a massively vested interest in this process going well, having a hard time just understanding essentially the directions of what they need to do on what timing, it seems ripe for disruption.
So Jay, what do you want to see in the next 6 to 18 months from Abby and Best Shot?
I want to hear more about how things are going with their model. It does seem like they've taken a critical eye towards aligning incentives with everybody involved. You know, when you hear that somebody's paying $30,000 for a process and you say our technology is free to that person, that raises a little bit of a question in my mind, like, well, there's probably some space to go directly to the consumer. But if lining up with the pharmacies is more incentive aligned for everybody in the value chain, that sounds like a really smart, really elegant solution. So I just want to see how that's going. I know this is still pretty early days, but I want to understand, you know, are these boutique pharmacies continuing to renew their relationship with the Best Shot? Is this proving out to be a really effective business model for them? Which are questions that we didn't honestly get a chance to dig into as much as we probably wanted to because of all of our other dumb questions about the industry at large. But yeah, I want to understand if that whole model of the value chain is working.
Well, you took my answer, so I will jump in with something else. I want to look at adoption amongst those who are actually going through the process. I want to see how that's increasing. Is that increasing at an increasing rate? I think that my answer will stem a lot from yours and whether or not this boutique pharmacy pipeline will convert to actual users and a community in the long run. So I'm very excited about what Abby is building. I learned a ton on this interview, and I hope you did it as well. If you want to reach out to us, you can send us a note on Twitter at UpsideFM or send us something a little longer at hello@upside.fm, and we will talk to you next week.
That's all for this week. Thanks for listening. We'd love to hear what you think about this episode, so tweet at us at UpsideFM or email us hello@upside.fm and let us know. You can learn more about us and browse our entire back catalog of episodes at upside.fm. And if you love our show, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts. That goes a long way in helping us bring high-quality guests to the show.
Rocky and Sylvester. One for underrated, two for underpaid. Today I'm gonna